Merhaba, welcome everybody. This is Cynthia Samson from Mayan Arab News Channel, Istanbul, Turkey, and Decode39 News Agency Italy. So here are top 6 news of the week from Decode39 News Agency Italy in English language. So here are as follows. So defending sovereign technologies, Leonardo and Electronica strike a new deal. Next news comes that is Navantia and Fincantieri strike a new agreement for European shipbuilding. Next news comes that is from China. So no fear of Chinese retaliation. MEP Driosto leak ID is in Taiwan. Next news comes that is from Italy. So strengthening Italy and US access. House Speaker Fico's trip to Washington. Next news comes that is from Italy. So Italy is in Putin's side while the explanation is given by Fiona Hill. And the last news comes that is caught between the home and G20 Biden's European trip. So now the news in details.
Defending sovereign technologies, Leonardo and Electronica strike a deal. Leonardo and Electronica join forces to tackle the national, European, and international market together. The EU defense and the Italian forces modernization drive. The agreement covers naval systems, helicopters, manned and unmanned aerial platforms. Strategic cooperation to support the growth of sovereign technologies. This is the core content of the agreement signed on Wednesday by Alessandro Profumo, CEO of Leonardo, and Enzo Benigni, President and CEO of Electronica. 31.33% of which is owned by the former company. The focus is on a common strategy to enhance the offer on the national, European, and international markets at a time of great turmoil on all three fronts. The agreement will enable a significant improvement to be achieved in the industrial and proactive synergy between the two main players in the domestic defense and security sector to provide clients with the best possible solutions, explained Mr. Profumo in a statement. As for Mr. Benigni, he remarked how the deal confirms the role of Electronica as national champion of electronic defense systems. Moreover, it clearly shows that the wealth of knowledge and the qualified skills of a national industry as main asset of the Italian technological sovereignty can and shall proceed jointly in order to address the global challenges and support the national efforts towards strategic autonomy. For Leonardo, added Mr. Profumo, the signing of the partnership is aimed at consolidating and strengthening Leonardo's core business in line with the goals of long-term strategic plan for sustainable growth by tomorrow 2030. The plan was presented before the pandemic and is based on three pillars: internal transformation, the drive for innovation with master the new, and the core businesses strengthening. The latter, for instance, includes the acquisition announced back in April of 30% of GEM Electronica, and indeed naval and avionics, fixed and rotary wing have been identified among the areas of strategic interest. This perimeter is where a set of golden rules has been agreed to share market needs in a scenario-based fashion in order to jointly address the calls coming from NATO and the EU as well as national programs. The agreement covers the naval systems, helicopters, manned and unmanned aerial platforms. Leonardo and Electronica will thus propose integrated solutions, electronic system and Leonardo platform system, which exist in the company's portfolio, or their technological developments to better meet the customer's needs. A special permanent steering committee has been set up to govern the agreement to ensure the full achievement of the partnership's goals. The joint statement explained it's composed of respective top management teams and has the duty of defining the strategic guidelines for the development of the evolutive plans and roadmaps of the collaboration agreement. The agreement between the two companies is part of a path that aims to strengthen Italy's defense capabilities in light of international context amidst the several challenges on the horizon and the processes of reflection within NATO and the EU. The latter's perimeter has been endowed with the EDF fund enrolled with Euro 7.9 billion between now and 2027, which has already launched the first calls for bids at the industrial level. ITOS, a matter of defining which programs to focus on, which expertise to share at an EU-wide level, and which ones to keep within the national perimeter. The debate was relaunched in August with Italy's ministerial directive for industrial defense policy signed by Defense Minister Lorenzo Giovrini. 30 pages, 7 lines of development, 8 of action, and 1 goal: an integrated defense system at the country service capable of supporting the modernization of the armed forces and preserving the industry's excellence. It all starts from the analysis of the international context, which has been complicated by the pandemic and is dominated by discussions on new technologies. The ability to keep up will depend on Italy's ability to preserve its strategic autonomy and its role in the international community of technologically advanced countries. The document reads: the directive calls for a more structured relationship with industry and the world office. Strengthening the Italy-US Access, House Speaker Fico trip to Washington. The Speaker of the lower house landed in Washington for a 3-day trip. He will see Speaker Pelosi and attend a string of meetings with representatives from internationally renowned think tanks. Robert Fico, president of the Italian Chamber of the Deputies, that is Speaker of the lower house and leading figure within the Five Star Movement, landed in Washington on Tuesday, November 2nd for a 3-day trip. Decode39 understands that President Fico's diplomatic mission hinges on two key endeavors, namely strengthening the progressive access between Italy and the United States and delving into some issues that have always been on President Joe Biden's agenda, such as new forms of democratic participation, human rights, and urban sustainability. The plan and the meetings. On Tuesday, President Fico will meet Bill Nelson, NASA administrator and former Democratic Party senator. He will also visit the Stephen F. Udvar Hazy Center at the National Air and Space Museum and the National Archives, where the Declaration of the Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights are kept. Wednesday is the most political day. In the morning, Mr. Fico will be received on Capitol Hill by Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives, who was recently in Rome to attend the opening ceremony of the Parliament's pre-COP26. Later, he will meet the leadership of the House, that is leaders from the Democratic and Republican Party as well as other representatives. The afternoon holds another meeting with Kathy Castor, President of the Commission on Climate Change. Finally, Mr. Fico will meet with some representatives of the German Marshall Fund think tank and some members of the Italian community. On Thursday, the Italian politician will attend the Unity Day and Armed Forces Day celebrations. Then he will visit the Arlington National Cemetery, attend the changing of the guard ceremony, and honor the fallen. Later on, he will see representatives of another prestigious think tank, the Brookings Institution, which is chaired by John Allen, former commander of NATO forces in Afghanistan. In the afternoon, he will visit another think tank, the Center for American Progress, CAP, and meet on Capitol Hill with David Cicilline, Democratic congressman of Italian origin and son of the mafia lawyer John Francis Cicilline, first gay mayor of a state capital, Providence, Rhode Island, vice president of the Caucus of Progressives, and member of the Europe subcommittee of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The visit's themes. The underlying meaning of his encounters is where the two key issues shine through and where the fact that President Fico is thinking of the Five Star Movement's future and its relationship with the Italian Democratic Party comes to light. Once a rowdy anti-establishment populist movement, the party has made considerable progress towards the normalization and institutionalization, and in doing so it found itself allying with the once loathed center-left PD. The meeting with Speaker Pelosi and that at CAP will happen a few days after the Global Progress Network's meeting in Rome on the sidelines of the G20 summit. This was willed into existence by PD's leader Enrico Letta and powered by CAP, which is undoubtedly the most politically aligned of the three think tanks on Mr. Fico's plan. It was founded by stalwart Clintonite John Podesta. As for the second key issue, one must look at the meetings at Brookings and the German Marshall Fund, both internationally prestigious research centers that offer programs dedicated to issues that are dear to President Fico since his earliest political days. The Italy-US relationship, Mr. Fico's Washington planner, is heavy with institutional opportunities which in turn are proof of the harmony between Italy and the US. This has become increasingly evident in several circumstances, including the visible entente between US President Joe Biden, his Italian counterpart Sergio Mattarella, and Prime Minister Mario Draghi, the conversation between Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio and the American Secretary of State Antony Blinken on the sidelines of the Rome G20 summit, as well as Minister of Economic Development Giancarlo Giorgetti's recent trip to Boston and Washington, Mr. Fico's formish interview after Mr. Biden's victory. In this context, it's useful to revisit President Fico's interview with Formish.net almost a year ago, a few days after the US presidential elections. He defined Joe Biden's victory as an opportunity to relaunch EU-US relations. Here are two passages from that interview. President Fico: "It looks like the White House has a new occupant, Joe Biden. What do you expect from his administration? I think that signs of discontinuity will be evident in different areas, starting with his commitment to the environment, a different approach to the migratory phenomenon, and the relationship with all minorities, some of which have gone through hard and distressing years. After all, some measures have already been announced by Mr. Biden, like re-entering in the Paris Accords and leaving the Muslim ban behind. On the international level, it's generally taken for granted that the US will be returning to a multilateral approach and that the transatlantic relationships will recover through renovated forms of collaboration. I think that both guidelines are more than necessary, seeing the enormous global challenges we are being called to face: the pandemic, climate change, fighting inequality. In these years, you have cultivated a steady relationship with Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the American House of Representatives. What is your collaboration based on, and how will it continue? With Nancy Pelosi, to whom I sent a letter of congratulations for her re-election at the House of Representatives, there have been in these years numerous occasions for confrontation, both bilateral and within the G7's presidents of the parliament's meetings. We have developed an excellent relationship and shared thoughts, both regarding matters of shared interest, for instance, around social changes caused by climate change, and more recently during the sad period of violence that followed George Floyd's assassination. Above all, we talked about the approach to follow in order to contrast the pandemic's diffusion, as well as important role that parliamentary diplomacy can play during this period in history. On these matters, I was confronted with a passionate and tenacious partner, but also one that's sensitive with regard to matters that I felt compelled to present her with in my capacity as president of the Chamber of Deputies, like Sheko 40 case. Caught Between home and the G20, Biden's European trip, the new US foreign policy is built on an unfinished economic transformation at home, but it promoted progress on transatlantic ties and climate. And all-encompassing post-G20 analysis by Brian Catullus, senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. The global spotlight shifts from Rome to Glasgow this week following the latest G20 summit held in Italy's capital, with climate change becoming the top global focus during the next few weeks at the international conference in Scotland. US President Joe Biden had a busy 3 days in Rome where his administration took some steps to give more form to its emerging foreign policy, one that has faced setbacks this summer and early fall with a bundled military withdrawal from Afghanistan and mismanaged announcement of a new security pact with Australia and Great Britain, a move that Mr. Biden described as clumsy in a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron. While the first leg of Mr. Biden's second foreign trip as president focused on some traditional national security concerns, including Iran and Turkey, and also underscored some of the chronic international challenges of COVID-19 crisis. The main headlines from the Rome portion of the trip featured the centrality of economics in his foreign policy agenda. Bridging homes and the world. The Biden administration is trying to deliver on a promise to transform the US global economic approach and integrate it with its ambitious efforts to shift its economic model at home. But one key challenge Mr. Biden faces in advancing this new foreign policy approach, which has a markedly different style of economic statecraft, is found at home. Mr. Biden showed up in Europe empty-handed and without the final approval from Congress for key items in his domestic reform agenda to increase public investments in infrastructure and the social safety net. This goes to show just how complicated is the shift his team is trying to make, that is changing US foreign policy in a way that aligns with his vision for a new domestic economic model. The divisions at home derive from both the Republican Party and some splits within his own Democratic Party. The American president didn't let them impact his global economic agenda, but the long-term viability of these international steps depends on the US producing some results on the domestic front, especially on climate investment commitments, tariffs and alliances. One important move on this global economic front was a deal to roll back tariffs on European steel and aluminium, an important step to reduce transatlantic trade tensions that had escalated during the Trump administration. Mr. Biden's team touted the move as a step that will help reduce costs at a time of concerns about inflation and logjams in global supply chains. The move is also important for what it signals about Mr. Biden's geopolitical approach on economic issues and how it stands in contrast to how former US President Donald Trump approached these issues with European partners. During his 4 years in office, Mr. Trump's economic nationalist approach sought to achieve the leverage with unpredictable and at times erratic moves on the economic front with close partners in Europe, but this ended up reducing strategic trust and causing doubts to seep into transatlantic relations. Mr. Biden's template has sought to rebuild cooperation with trading partners in Europe and Asia on a range of economic fronts, with a stronger emphasis on those democratic countries who may share some concerns about China's assertive economic model. As the global economy continues to recover from COVID-19 crisis, the Biden administration has sought to build a stronger degree of cooperation between countries in the three main engines of the global economy, America, Europe and Asia, and do so in a way that recognizes that other countries will likely hedge their economic relation between the US and China. What Mr. Biden is trying to do with his global economic approach may have been best captured in the Center for American Progress report from earlier this year, A More Perfect Union. Moving forward, the United States needs to redefine economic statecraft in ways that facilitate national development at home and strengthen ties with fellow liberal democratic allies abroad. The core goal of US economic statecraft should be to build a shared industrial and innovation ecosystem that spans both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, incorporating America's most important allies in Europe and Asia Pacific. This economic concert of power would bind America and its closest partners together in a shared project to compete effectively with China, promote the collective prosperity of its member nations, and show that democracy can deliver on its economic promises. Climate, the global tax, and the home front, in addition to the steel and aluminium tariff deal, which Mr. Biden and his European partners say will help address climate change by creating disadvantages to dirty steel production of the sort that comes out of China. The first leg of his Europe trip also saw the G20 announce an agreement for a global corporate minimum tax of 15% in an effort to level the international playing field and prevent multinational corporations from rerouting their profits towards lower tax jurisdictions. The devil is in the details in implementation. Many of the countries, including the states, need to get other parts of their governments to approve measures to make this a reality. But the deal represents a proactive attempt by the Biden administration to work with the world's other major economies to reset the balance that had shifted in favor of the global private sector for decades during the waves of globalization and privatization of the 1980s and the early 2000s, and garner more resources for public investments and government spending needed to address urgent challenges including the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. As the global spotlight shifts to COP26 summit, expectations for major steps forward in the struggle to address climate change are low. Divisions between countries about who will bear the financial burden for the transformation needed. Political gridlock within countries on various climate measures. Recent run-ups in energy prices and the global supply chain challenges have all complicated the prospects for success at this particular summit. However, that's why steps that could lead to better economic and climate policy coordination between the US and Europe has witnessed in the agreement to end the simmering transatlantic trade war are important. They could help shift the overall international environment in ways that help the US and its close partners to reshape the global economic system in ways that are mutually beneficial and also support a transition, a green economy. Strengthening transatlantic ties. US Trade Representative Catherine Tai explained that the US and Europe not only took a step back from the tariff wars on steel and aluminium, but they also agreed to suspend World Trade Organization disputes each other related to 232 actions. Furthermore, she explained how US EU discussions are significant for fighting climate change, stating that President Biden has been clear that we must find new ways to tackle the growing crisis and create jobs. As part of the resolution, the US and the EU have agreed to negotiate the first ever carbon-based agreement on steel and aluminium trade and create greater incentives for reducing carbon intensity across modes of production of steel and aluminium produced by American and European companies. Ms. Dai underscored the importance of this deal, arguing that is why we will create a global arrangement to encourage like-minded economies that share our collective commitment to market-based principles and addressing the carbon intensity of these industries. So no matter what happens in the next few weeks in Glasgow, the Biden administration is looking for practical ways to produce progress in cooperation with close partners in Europe and around the world. The domestic variable. Ultimately, however, the Biden administration's ambitious agenda to transform the global economic statecraft component of US foreign policy heavily depends on what it can get done on the domestic front here in America. The political landscape is fraught with dysfunction and division, with Mr. Biden's proposal to invest in infrastructure and rebuilding the country's social safety net in a way that helps America's workers and companies still hanging in the balance. Countries around the world, including in Europe, have become quite accustomed to seeing the political pendulum swinging from Republicans to Democrats and back again at a dizzying pace. All of these political shifts inside the states come with major implications for its foreign policy and how it approaches global economic issues, as we are all witnessing in the shift from Mr. Trump to Mr. Biden. The sharp divides between the two parties and within both camps have raised new questions about the US strategic steadiness and reliability in recent years, with deep concerns about the fragility of America's political system the next time the political pendulum swings. Will it remain attached? Italy is in Putin's sights. Fiona Hill explains why. Brookings, senior fellow, years of service for the U.S. intelligence and as advisors to 3 U.S. presidents. Fiona Hill, one of the world's leading Russia experts, details the Kremlin's threat to Italy during a webinar with former Deputy Foreign Minister Marta Dasso. Populist parties in Italy making common cause with parties that they think are similar in Russia is a big mistake. Thus spoke Fiona Hill, one of the world's leading experts on Russia, life devoted to American intelligence and then in the White House, first under George Bush and Barack Obama, then as the head of the European and Eurasian affairs at the National Security Council under Donald Trump. The expert was speaking at a webinar hosted by Formiche, where she presented her latest autobiographical book, There Is Nothing for You Here, Finding Opportunity in the 21st Century. Mariner book, speaking alongside the director of Espina and former Deputy Foreign Minister Marta Dasso. Ms. Hill warned that one cannot be naive with Russian President Vladimir Putin and that Italy is still a target of Russian intelligence and the Russian government. There is no shortage of evidence. Last March, 1 month after Prime Minister Mario Draghi took office, Navy officer Walter Byatt was arrested in Rome, was caught red-handed in selling NATO secrets to 2 Russian intelligence agents. Nor is it a mystery that the Italian capital is crisscrossed by undercover Kremlin men, ranging from spies to the many oligarchs who have business and interests in Italy, as detailed in the new book by Italian journalists Jacopo Leccoboni and Gianluca Paolucci. Oligarchy diplomacy, Miss Hill explained, is another matter altogether. I think it's absolutely fine and also advisable for Italy to try to play a role like that. Italy does have a different history of connections with Russia and Soviet Union than many other European countries do. There have been ties between Italy and the Russian Empire. Problems arise when mediation becomes political collusion, and as Ms. Hill noted, some Italian parties lack awareness of the ways Russia tries to manipulate other countries. The Russians use money as means of influence, not just hacking and ransomware attacks and stealing secrets. Russian politicians do not travel to Italy on official state business, continued the expert, but rather attend conventions and dialogues of civilization or meeting of like-minded populist parties. Underestimating these endeavors is a huge mistake, as these tactics replicate Joseph Stalin's own. He would invite in communists and fellow socialists from around the world, but the whole purpose was to influence them on their behalf, only to use them as assets later. This is not a two-way street, it's a one-way street. Miss Hill spoke from experience in the book. Read the excerpt. She recounts having seen Mr. Putin several times while attending meetings of the international experts on Russia convened in the Kremlin's shadow with the ostensible purpose of discussing international politics. The Valdai Club meetings, she explained, were part of an overt Kremlin effort to influence the opinions of Western academics and commentators about Mr. Putin's Russia. The same risk exists today with parties forming official relations with the Russian government. It happened with Matteo Salvini's League, which signed an agreement with Mr. Putin's party, United Russia, in 2017. This was later renewed by the youth sections of both parties and is still in force today. Ms. Hill maintained that Russian intervention in our political systems has become more evident over the years. Countries like Italy, France, or Germany are no less vulnerable to manipulation than Ukraine or other former Soviet republics, and even intelligence operations, she says, have become more shameless. Let me offer an example with the 2018 poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in Salisbury. In the UK, this was a spy on spy act where Russian operatives filled a bottle of perfume with the banned nerve agent Novichok, enough to kill 4,000 people. After soaking the Skripal's doorknob, they discarded the bottle in a donation receptacle of a charity store, resulting in one death, several injuries, and widespread contamination. Political figures around the world downplayed the gravity of the incident at the time. She recalled thinking that it would not happen elsewhere. That's also a mistake. According to Ms. Hill, I hate to say it, imagine if this was Pesau, she quipped, adding that a drastic and necessary solution would be to immediately expel all intelligence operatives caught stealing secrets in Italy and in other European countries. Underestimating Russian penetration into the political system is a risk that the United States still faces today. The White House is no longer inhabited by Mr. Trump, against whom Hill testified in a now famous hearing in his first impeachment trial for the Ukraine case, and yet the threat remains. Our democracy is letting its guard down, warned the expert. President Biden has made the country more resilient, she continued, but he is in trouble on the domestic front, and not all parties understand the risk that American democracy ran on January 6, so much so that the hypothesis of Trump candidacy in 2024 is still alive. The former president does not have the majority of the country, but he has a very strong minority among the Republicans. Many in the party can't stand him but are willing to re-elect him to displease the Democrats. Fincantieri and Navantia strike new agreement for European shipbuilding. The Fincantieri and Navantia will strengthen cooperation and evaluate the benefits of collaborating in the maritime field. The effort is geared towards the EU's defense programs in the naval sector and underscores the sea's renewed centrality in matters of national security policy. The biggest Italian and Spanish shipbuilders, Fincantieri and Navantia, have signed a memorandum of understanding to strengthen their already close relationship and explore the shared benefit of a broadened collaboration in the naval and maritime domains. The signature took place in the Navantia stand at the FEINDEF exhibition in Madrid and was brought forward by General Manager Naval Vessels Division of Fincantieri, Giuseppe Giordo, and Navantia Chairman Riccardo Dominguez. In a joint release, the company stated they aim to assess future opportunities for the Italian and Spanish navies, which aside from joint projects include the development of future destroyers and other naval platforms built for the future European Defence Force. We are very satisfied to give substance to a plan that can no longer be postponed and to build a collaboration path based on important programs of the two navies, commented Giuseppe Bono, Managing Director of Fincantieri. We aim to strengthen European defense and boost this industry's global position, stated Mr. Dominguez, and We think that agreements as ours pave the way towards this objective. Mr. Bono added that both companies have long agreed that in order to stand its ground with global challenges of the future, we need a robust and long-lasting cooperation in defense and security field at a European level. The EPC program and Italy's plans for the Navy. Both shipyards already collaborate together with the French Naval Group and the Navarrese joint venture within the framework of the European Patrol Corvette program, the most important naval initiative in the EU's permanent structured cooperation project. At the beginning of October, the Italian Navy chaired the operational meeting that featured the representatives of other involved countries, namely France, Spain, Greece, and Portugal, and industries, as well as the European Defence Agency, which has been identified as the institutional framework for the definition and harmonization of common requirements. Italy's Defense Minister Lorenzo Guerini himself called the EPC the program with the greatest potential from a naval viewpoint as he presented his 2021 to 2023 plan to the Italian Parliament's defense committees. The plan entails the acquisition of new destroyers DDX in the financial coverage, which forecasts almost euro 1.9 billion up to 2035 to equip the Navy with two replacement units. An additional euro 400 million up to 2035 have been earmarked for acquiring two offshore units LLS to replace the more obsolete logistics units. A total of euro 3 million will cover the first phase of the study of new amphibious units program. Euro 170 million are expected to be spent on half-life modernization of Doria class destroyers up to 2027. The sea's newfound centrality. The baseline is the awareness of the wider Mediterranean's renewed centrality. The area, along with the sea dimension in more general terms, is of utmost interest for the security and defense of the country. Admiral Enrico Credendino explained this much last week on board the Carrier aircraft carrier on his first public appearance after being designated by the Council of Ministers as the next Chief of Staff of the Navy. We want to work together with the community to remind everyone that Italy is a maritime country whose safety and well-being are closely linked to the sea, he said on Thursday. He will officially replace Admiral Giuseppe Dragon, who has already been appointed the next Chief of Defense Staff. No fear of Chinese retaliation. MEP Deriosto League ID is in Taiwan. Decode39 reached out to the Italian MEP who is in Taipei for a historic diplomatic visit to hear his thoughts of EU-Taiwan relationship and China. On Wednesday, a delegation of 7 MEPs was welcomed in Taipei for the first and the historic diplomatic visit of its kind, which is set to breathe new life into expanding EU-Taiwan relations and ruffle Beijing's feathers even further. The endeavor is charged with political significance as China considers the island a rebel breakaway province to reunite with the mainland and vehemently opposes any foreign attempt to legitimize its independence. Beijing's mission to the EU chimed in beforehand to condemn the trip, saying it would seriously violate the EU's commitment to the One China policy, damage China's core interest, and undermine the healthy development of China-EU relations. When contacted by Decode39, the body referred us back to that statement. Regardless, the MEP delegation of the European Parliament's Special Committee on Foreign Interference made it to Taiwan anyways. They are scheduled to meet Prime Minister Xu Chang and President Tsai Ing-wen. Among other officials, Decode39 reached out to Marco Driosto, League ID MEP and only Italian among the delegation. Alongside him are the French Rafael Glucksmann, SND, the Czech marketer Gregorova Greens, the Lithuanians Andrius Cubilius EPP and Petrus Austrevicius. Renew Europe, the Greek Georgios. Kirtsos APP and the Austrian Andreas Skyder SND. Taiwan is a crucial scenario, Mr. Driosto told Decode39 as he traveled towards Taipei, not only from a geopolitical viewpoint and in the global chessboard, but also to understand how to deal with the Chinese cyber attacks, interference, and propaganda operations underway in Europe and Italy. The MEP stated that the visit will be of the utmost importance for the whole of European Union to study Taiwanese best practices and means to fend off the effects of Beijing's attack. Cyber warfare and cybersecurity will be crucial issues for the defense of the entire Western world. We cannot find ourselves unprepared, but there are other reasons behind the visit. In the recent past, China behaved opaquely and incorrectly towards the West, said Mr. Driosto. The trampling on human rights in Hong Kong, the persecution of Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and the delays in warning the whole world regarding the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic are actions that cannot go unnoticed. The politicians added that recent tensions and the military escalation between China and Taiwan also impacted the relations between Washington and Beijing. In light of these events, for us in the League who see transatlantic relations as a fundamental pillar of foreign policy, it's also essential to highlight that the West and Europe know where to stand alongside the American allies in defense of freedoms. As the Chinese mission warned, this trip will not be devoid of diplomatic consequences. Fellow traveler Glucksmann, for one, has already been sanctioned in the past by the Chinese government. Nevertheless, Mr. Driosto told us he is not afraid of a harsh reaction from Beijing, believing that as elected members of parliament, INGE members have the duty to defend Europe's values and principles. We have this responsibility and we must carry on without fear of retaliation or threats, he said. Last month, MEPs largely approved the first EU-Taiwan report, which called for actively intensifying political and commercial ties, albeit under the One China policy, and considering Taiwan a key partner and democratic ally in the Indo-Pacific on its own merit. Mr. Driosto believes that maintaining solid commercial and economic relations is essential, considering the EU and Taiwan's mutual interest in semiconductor sector, where Taiwan is a world leader. Also, the Italian MEP believes it necessary to understand if there is a European political will to push some international organizations to open up to Taiwan, as the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken suggested. As for the EU's investment agreement with China, CAI, the approval of which ground to a halt earlier this year, Mr. Driosto upholds the decision to freeze it at the moment. There is no great chance of resuming negotiations in the short term, he commented.
So that's all for the day. This was Cynthia Samson from Mayan Arab News Channel, Istanbul, Turkey, and Decode39 News Agency Italy. Subscribe to my news channel for latest news updates in Hindi, English, and Arabic language. Thank you. Shukran.